Welcome once again to another episode of the Precision Health Pod, where we talk to the people building and experiencing the future of health. Today, we want to welcome Marc Champagne, author, mental fitness strategist, and host of Behind the Human Pod, where he unpacks the mental fitness practices of some of the world's most brilliant thinkers. Welcome, Marc. We're excited to have you.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
Well, to get started, I have to ask, what does mental fitness mean to you, and what is a mental fitness strategist?
Two very good questions. Mental fitness to me in its simplest form is just anything that we do to train our minds to work for us instead of against us. And I keep it broad like that because just like physical fitness, just because you may not like to run doesn't mean that you rule out all of exercise, for example. So same thing with the mind, really like anything that we can do to become more self-aware, to understand when we start having those looping thought patterns, and then most importantly, have the tools, practices, and rituals to be able to flip us back into more of a thriving state where we feel good and where we do our best work. So that loops into, for me, what a mental fitness strategist is. And I kind of had to make up that term because I was struggling for the longest time trying to figure out like the intersect of, I guess, two kind of worlds that I've been operating in since graduating university. And the first half being very much so related to brand strategy and product strategy and as just a strategist in general. And then, the second half, which is what I'm in right now, or I should say they combine, but the second half really focused on how do we optimize our mind? And again, like how do we bring mental fitness and make these practices more accessible and more relatable to people? And instead of falling under that category of a coach or a guide, strategist felt more appropriate because for me, especially working on brands, like we're all used to creating a brand strategy and having a vision and having some core pillars that that ensure that our tactics and our activities and everything we're doing aligns to the mission, right? But very few times do we do that for our minds. Like who am I now and who am I striving to become, which links right back to health as well. So then if I'm striving to become this person, well, do my actions today, my choices, are they supporting that person or are they pushing me farther away? And, helping people and teams become more mentally fit and having those brand strategies in mind is just at least one solution to getting closer to that, to your personal and professional objectives.
Definitely. And fitness as well as brand strategy, as you talk about, it's all about improvement and optimization, but you can't really improve what you don't measure or where you don't have a baseline. So how do you think about helping people create a baseline for where they are and then create that kind of personalized strategy to move forward?
Well, I think first we need to pause and check in with ourselves. And that sounds really obvious or simple, but I would say that is the biggest problem that we have, at least in North America, where things are so automated, so fast, so productivity focused that it's so easy to fall on autopilot. Same like, with our nutrition, with our work, with everything. Because if you stop, as soon as we stop asking questions, and I mean, you have young kids, like those kids are only evolving because they're curious, right? They learn how to walk because they're curious about reaching out to the table or getting their balance. And so we've all gone through that and we've all had very, very curious minds. And at some point, that curiosity just kind of gets sucked away. And next thing you know, we're not really thinking for ourselves. Perfect example. You go into a grocery store or a supermarket. If you're not thinking while you're in there, you're not coming out with healthy choices. There's no way, right? You're on the autopilot of marketing at that point, right? Or what sells the best and so forth within the end caps. So, I mean, that's one example, but when it comes to just overall, whether it's our work and our personal life and our health specifically, I think we need to just slow down and check in, like, how am I feeling? And like, what's really important to me, professionally, and also just like the big buckets of life, like my family, my work, my hobbies, my health, all of that stuff. And see, like, take inventory of where we're at and where we want to be. And then the middle is where we can then start to design, the practices and the habits and the systems to support that. And then that's when, okay, well, if I want to be at this place, then like what tools can I leverage, right? What data do I need to track, and whatever works for you, like whatever motivates you to see the pattern, to see the progress and so forth, but continually checking in is, I think, first step.
Definitely. And you can really see your passion around this topic and kind of how you think about it. It's very, very thoughtful. You started your career more in corporate America. How did you transition to this work, this passion that you're now kind of focused on throughout everything you're really doing?
Well, it started, I mean, I always had some element of mental fitness, even in my corporate life. I wasn't calling it that, obviously, at that time. What happened was, I remember I started in a sales function, and at that time, I was hired with a group of people, and then we were all essentially flown out to a head office to be trained. And I remember thinking, I'm like, I'm in a sales function. We're all being trained essentially the same way. How possibly can I stand out of this group and the large organization? And for whatever reason, what kind of came to me was like, you know what? I'm going to get up a little bit earlier and start reading positive content and start studying other people that were interesting. So I started doing that, about 10 minutes earlier in the morning, started reading different books and blogs and so forth at that time, at least. And what materialized really fast was that everyone that was being profiled had some sort of reflective practice, and they were all asking really powerful or good quality questions. So I started writing those questions down, and then either in the moment I would journal on them, and then start my day from a really good perspective, or I'd hold on to the question and start at and journal on it the next day, and just did that for years. But I was traveling a lot and using different apps to do that, and just eventually grew really frustrated with the at least the apps that were out there, because there was, at that time, there was nothing like a Headspace or Calm that guides you into a meditation practice that would guide you into a journaling practice. So I would copy these questions and I'd paste them into another app and back and forth, and like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And that's how the idea of Keo, which was, again, at its time, one of the first guided journaling apps out there that took prompts and packs of prompts and collaborations with a whole bunch of different people and brands on topics like, Adam Grant. We had 10 questions from him around workplace feedback, prompts you can reflect on, and just put those all in one space so that when you tapped on those questions, you would fire up a journal entry and you can do that reflection, right? So it was really the combination of, there's all this great knowledge out there, but instead of just consuming it and kind of letting it come in and come out, pick the stuff that's appropriate for you right now and journal on that right now to get those results. So that's how the kind of the both worlds came together. And then eventually, knowing what it would take to build a brand, because I was doing that, I was out of sales at that point. I was directly in product management. I'm like, I can only do so much with two kind of functions. And at that time, my wife was pregnant with our first son, so there was a little bit of a grace period where she was bagged by like 8 p.m. So I would work after that on this app. But then as soon as he came along, it was a whole other, story. So I decided to leave, and we launched the app.
It sounds like journaling is one of the kind of practices that you would say that's a great place for a lot of people to start. But after kind of, I think you're at over 260 episodes of the Behind the Human Pod. You've been doing this for a number of years. What would you say are some other common mental fitness practices or kind of lessons learned that really help people achieve their goals from a mental fitness perspective?
Well, I'd say so. Just on the topic of journaling first, because that I think that is the staple going through the guests, but in a way that if you expand the definition, and this is the way I think of journaling, is if you think of the practice behind it, it's just reflection. And when you think of journaling as reflection, then now all of a sudden it's not just pen to paper. It's not just an app. It could be just walking and thinking and taking time to process something, or taking time to release stuff, or recording an audio note on a prompt that you heard, or an idea or so forth. So I always like kind of to set that baseline, because then it opens up a whole other avenue of reflection. And that's what, out of all the episodes, and including the people that I studied for the book, they're all just taking time in different ways, in ways that work with their schedule and their lives, but taking time to think, coming kind of full circle to how we open the conversation. You don't create these billion-dollar companies or these massive innovations by following the status quo. It just doesn't happen, right? So they're asking questions, and then they're relying on whatever practices they have, whether that's meditation or breath work is a big one, one that I'm personally using more and more of, because you can stack a lot of great practices within breath work and the holds and so forth. But they're doing things to ensure that their minds aren't clogged up with a whole bunch of emotional baggage or just, relationships and thoughts and things that they're worrying about. Like, really, it's almost like opening the door, like the front door and the back door of your home, and blowing out, the dust and stuff like that, and creating a cleaner space so that, when we need to access something, you're not going in and emptying out the whole room. You're there, it's organized. It's like a neatly organized library in a way. And that also tends to be when ideas surface, right? They're there. It's just we need to allow our minds to surface them and form the connection points to do that.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you exercise or when you're on a walk, that's when your brilliant ideas strike. Just making sure you have a
Totally.
method to allow that to come out when it happens. Are there any surprising practices that you've heard from your guests or kind of people that you've worked with that maybe have worked really well for them, or that you said, hey, like, this is interesting, let me try this?
Yeah, one that always stands out to me was from an interview with Naveen Jain, um, I'm sure you know of his work at Viome and so forth. Um, uh, and he runs a space company as well. And I remember him talking about just this idea of, when big decisions come up, that he takes 15 minutes, closes his eyes, and just visualizes himself having made the decision 6 months down the road. And if there's anything intuitively that feels off from that decision being made, he doesn't do it. And I just remember thinking, because the example was, that practice has saved millions and millions of dollars when the spreadsheets and everything else looked like it's 100% yes going forward. And that one always comes to mind, to just slow down, because we like the momentum of things and seeing the progress and feeling the progress. Like when we feel like we're making progress, we're typically at our happiest. But it takes some discipline and some training to just pause and wait a second. Does this feel right? Like, what am I hearing in the whispers in this situation? And, usually there's data, there's insight there that, we may have not caught. It's there if we ask the questions.
And we've talked a lot about mental fitness as an individual. It's really around allowing your mind to open up, having practices that really allow for deeper thinking, paying attention to intuition is what it kind of sounds like that lesson is, which is really important. How does mental fitness look differently for a workplace or for an employee versus for yourself as an individual?
Well, they're very similar. I mean, the big thing with a team or employees or brand teams or whatever it is that I try to be pretty upfront that, it's nearly impossible for us to do our best work and best thinking if our mind is clogged up and looping in fear states or fearing uncertainty and so forth, right? Which, again, if left on the default track, I mean, just firing up, an internet browser with the news will automatically put you in a fear state, or social media will put you in a fear state in comparison mode. So this is what I mean by the check-ins. And like, we have to take individually first accountability for some check-ins and some practices to at least start our days on our own terms, because we know we're going to get hit by society and all of these other things that are outside of our control. So if we have those practices, we can at least acknowledge or realize, okay, this is one of those situations. Here's my toolkit of 5 different things that I know will put my mind in a happy state or a smile on my face, that I can pause and rechannel that narrative and put me back into a thriving state. So it always starts at the individual level, but I like especially when working with teams, when we're together and we're doing breath work together, the most fun situations is usually there's like a team dinner or something the night before and everyone's having a good time, but that goes into a later evening situation. So I often ask, to have my session first thing in the morning the next day, because I know people are going to come in, and I always ask, like, how's everyone's mind feeling? One word. And usually, they'll either say things like, I'm curious or I'm excited. Then I'll say, okay, now tell me the real truth, because I was at the same dinner as you. I'm also tired. So then they're like, yeah, I'm tired. My eyes feel heavy and so forth. But then we do 6 to 10 minutes of guided breath work, and it's like a whole new room. So when it comes to that, with the team, everyone can feel that kind of energy exchange, and all of a sudden, like, eyes are open and people are listening. And then we get into, okay, well, here are some prompts to identify um, practices that you can personalize to your routine and so forth. And then we get into more of them. So it's always a mix of feeling what's possible with as an example, breath work or gratitude prompts. That's a big one too, that you immediately feel the benefits. And then leaving teams with preventative mental fitness. And the key though is that I know this is not always possible, but is that it's not just a one-off thing. It's like, if we're going to kick off the year with, let's say an introduction to mental fitness, then let's look at your next planning period. Or if you're going to be releasing, I don't know, another brand strategy, or there's a product release or whatever, whenever you're getting people together, let's layer in the mental fitness again, so it's top of mind. And not just top of mind, but also so that you can prime the minds of the team, so that we can get rid of the fear states, and then you can ideate at a whole other level. Right. So that's probably the difference between individual and teams, is more so the frequency and baking it in to the company strategy, so that the work actually supports the brands or the teams.
And from a tactical perspective for founders or managers, what are some systems and processes that they can put in place to make sure that you're doing the cadence correctly, that you're supporting people not just once, but over the course of the year or the course of the month? What advice do you have for those folks?
Well, it's one of those, just like, kind of practice what you preach, right? I mean, if I think of some of the leaders that I've interviewed on the show, the most successful ones were they've given really great like adoption examples, is where their teams see them doing this stuff. I remember I interviewed Radix Sally from Swiss Vitamins out of Australia at one point, and he was the CEO, and he had this glass office essentially in the main headquarters, and he would go in early, and there was no blinds or anything like that, and he had a little couch in there, and he would sit on the couch and he would start his day meditating. And over time, he said, it was interesting because I knew people could see it. Obviously, people are walking by, like, what is he doing? And then he would get questions. He'd be like at lunch and be like, well, what were you doing? And so forth. And next thing you know, more and more people started to adopt the meditation practice. And he would explain, like, well, this is why I do it. And all of a sudden, now that's baked into the culture, right? So, practice kind of what you preach type thing. Just, I would share practices that are working really well for you individually as a leader. But then also, just like I said, making sure that at those bigger company touch points, that there's something there. And it doesn't, this is not a pitch for me, anyone, like, bring in something that will help people's minds feel like you took their mind to the spa, essentially, right? Like, there's no downside to doing that.
And your new book, Personal Socrates, congrats on the book, by the way. It presents about 100 questions that have the power to change your life and work. Are there any of those kind of questions that you'd say, hey, managers, you should tell your teams to look at this? Or as an individual, what are some of your favorite ones that are really important?
Yeah, whenever it comes to the questions, usually just because I know that people get the most out of it if they follow this flow, and that's the same thing with your organization or team, but it's to open the book and look at the table of contents and just scan either the people that are profiled or the actual prompt and see where your mind stops, and start with that question, because for whatever reason, intuitively, you stop there. There's something of interest, and usually there's something of that can be very much relatable to whatever you or your company is going through. and you'll get the most out of it. And same thing with reading, in my opinion, when looking at different podcasts to consume, like pick the ones that you're going to get some value out of right now. But in general, I think the ones that I see teams getting most hung up on, or I should say where mental loops start to happen, is when it feels like there's a lot of uncertainty, which we have no shortage of right now in the market and so forth. So then prompts like what is within my control, or even just statements like everything is impermanent, right? Like that, even our thoughts and our emotions right now, it's here right now, but it's not always going to be like that. So just subtle reminders that, that too, like this storm will pass, but also then layering on, well, what is within my direct control right now? Always is your mood. You can decide how you want to mentally process a situation. And, easier said than done. So one way to do that, if you're feeling, down, or if you're feeling a lack of motivation, is to just throw in some gratitude. Think of someone that you don't give enough credit or thanks to, that you'd like to give more credit or thanks to. And whoever that person is, and whoever's listening right now, you can do that. Just send them a quick text to say, hey, I was just thinking about you. I hope you had a great day, or I hope you have a great day. And they're for sure are most probably going to write back saying, hey, you made my day, thank you. And then they're going to make your day. And what's not happening in the meantime is you're not looping on whatever was irritating you in the first place, because we can't be grateful and upset at the same time. We're just not in those two states of mind at the same time. So it's like all these little tricks, right? All these little mental hacks that we don't have to suffer all day in these loops, or days and weeks and so forth, right? Like there are things that are accessible to us that, as long as we take some time to flip or have our individual practices, and for some people that might be meditation, that might be a quick walk, but just identify those practices and activities that that 100% if you do that thing, you're going to feel good almost immediately. So just make sure those things are in your schedule, every week.
And I love that they're small too. So like that gratitude practice you just mentioned could take 3 minutes or less.
Totally.
So there's a lot of kind of tips and tricks that you can integrate into your day. A lot of our audience are busy people. They're professionals. They're working parents. They don't have a ton of time, but they're still motivated to improve their health. So those short, quick tips are always really helpful.
And that's key, Rachel. I mean, this happened to me literally last night. You, I know, can resonate with this, and any other parent. I mean, my 1-year-old decided he was not into sleep last night, or at least half of the night. So that, for me, most of my mental fitness and physical fitness is early in the morning. So that obviously, and I know how important sleep is. So I slept a little bit longer, and that threw off my regular routine. But the key was I still did a short round of breath work to start the day. And, I didn't have the other things, but there was one thing there. So I think like for busy people and parents and so forth, it's just adjust, including your schedule. When you have, 3 core things that you want to do, but something comes up and blows up the day, take a minute instead of just going into reaction mode and adjust the to-do list, shift the priorities, because then you finish the day in a motivated state versus I didn't get everything done that I wanted to get done. And that affects your sleep at night. That affects how you show up the next day. It's just breaking the patterns.
Definitely. And obviously mental fitness is part of a more holistic health journey. What else do you do for your health? You've got the mental fitness down. What else are you doing on a day-to-day or weekly basis?
I mean, the biggest thing, obviously, is related to, I think, for me, at least for health, like just being really present and conscious of what I'm consuming, and knowing like where my willpower will, lead me astray if I don't think about it. For example, like sweets or like seed oils and things like that. But just knowing that's in my makeup right now, and having reminders of, okay, I'm not going down that route, because these are my core objectives and goals for the year: health plus business plus professional and personal and whatnot, and mood being the big one. It's not going to support me. Right. So just, for me, it's always, again, the check-ins, just taking a look at, like, I started using a mood tracker, and it's a quite good one that links up okay, well, what activities have you been doing, or what did you eat, for example? And you can customize everything and just start to see the patterns that, okay, the days that I have a lot of podcasts, typically for me, my mood is like in an elevated state because I leave these situations in a flow state usually. Versus, if I'm doing another activity, might be the reverse. So then it's just data, right? Okay, well, I need to adjust my calendar next week to support a more elevated mood because everyone wins in that case. I mean, I'm a better dad, I'm a better husband, I'm a better leader, and so forth. So all of that. And on the health side, I mean, this is where I can't wait until your products are in Canada. A CGM was like a game changer for me. And just that data and just understanding, okay, where I thought, I was making healthy choices, was just not the case, at least for me personally. And just again, data, having that insight that I know even my wife's amazing homemade granola is like, I might as well have a Mars bar after I eat that.
Yeah. No, that feedback in terms of kind of what's actually going on in your biology and being able to tailor the approach to your specific goals, your specific biology is really important. And on that note, is there anything as you think about the future of mental fitness, the future of health, that's really exciting for you, or what does the world to you look like in 5 or 10 years from a health and mental fitness perspective?
Yeah, I mean, what excites me most is I really do believe that mental fitness will be talked about and adopted just like physical fitness, where, someone will say something like, I'll meet you for dinner, but I'm gonna get a run in first. Whereas in this case it'd be, I'm gonna do some breath work or I'm gonna meditate and then I'll meet you or so forth. And it's just kind of casual, talk like that. And it's just really integrated. Or just like, you know, there was a whole phase where companies were bringing in gyms and stuff into their organizations and whatnot. And, some companies have like meditation rooms and stuff like that. But I think what's going to happen, it's less about having like a physical meditation room and more about integrating these practices. And, when we're doing those team meetings, or, there's a lot of organizations that I'm working with where they're taking their teams and doing like offsites in national parks or something like that. Well, that's great, when you're there, but how do we integrate like the power of Yosemite or Joshua Tree or wherever you're at, wherever the magic is happening? How do you bring back that energy and integrate it through your practices so that it lives on and it becomes these things become habits, so that when your mind feels good and thriving in those exceptional states, that you can make it the norm. And I really think it's possible. I think it's possible that our minds feel more happy than not. I think it's the reverse right now, given the mental health crisis that we're unfortunately in. But if we, first of all, dial in our sleep and nutrition, I mean that is probably 75% of the battle right there. And then you layer in the other tools, it's possible. It's
Yeah,
really
and it's
possible.
really
More than
around.
possible. It's doable.
Yeah, definitely. And it sounds like it's also about helping people discover it, guide them to what
Yeah.
are some ideas that will work for them, what are some tools that will work for them, but making sense of this noise that is the current health industry in a really personalized but easy way for people to consume. And on that note, summing up everything we've talked about today, what would you say is one thing that our audience should start doing to improve their mental fitness? And what is one thing they should stop doing?
Hmm. Well, just on the note of like, making tools accessible and so forth, like what comes to mind is like anything that I've talked about today, none of this stuff is new. It's literally been around since the beginning of time. It's just we need to find the narratives that relate to us. So I would say think about, your work, your life, and what you're doing, and see, like, really just be honest. It's not about judging yourself. Just be honest with yourself. Like, what's working and what's not working for me, and do that for the most important buckets of your life, and then start noticing, like, well, what are the patterns, like what's fueling that when I'm in a fear state or not feeling well. Well, what was I doing that day or the day before? What were some of the activities that might contribute to that mental state, or even physically how I'm feeling? And just slowly over time start collecting more and more data to see the trends, and then just get clear, right? Like the The most important thing, and it sounds so easy, but most people just don't do this. Who do you want to be? That simple. Like we evolve, like we're programmed to evolve, and when we're evolving and progressing, we feel good. So just take a moment to dream and really see, like, how do I want to feel? Like at the end of 2023 in December, what are you celebrating about yourself? Like, what is it? Where are you? Who's around you? What did you do? Like, what would just put a huge smile on your face and allow you to go into the holidays thinking, yeah, I did it. And just start by that, identifying that vision. And just by doing that, a lot of the stuff's going to start to fall in place, but you've got to do the check-ins. Keep checking in to see, okay, am I on that path?
I love that kind of prompt of how do I want to feel? So much of goal setting, and even I do this. I just went through goal setting and strategy meetings as a team too. It's all about accomplishments. What do we want to achieve? What are the milestones we want to think about? How are we going to get there? And it's less, how do I want to feel? How do I want to feel about kind of what we've done? How do I want to feel about the accomplishments? How do I want to feel as a human? Do I want to enter the holidays stressed, overwhelmed, and frustrated? Or do I want to enter the holidays proud and like excited and empowered and thinking about those questions? That's one thing I'm going to do when I get off of this.
It's such a subtle shift, right? It's literally one question away from a different perspective or shift.
Definitely. And then last question, how can people find you? And how can they find your podcast and your book to kind of learn more about you and what you do?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest place is just behindthehuman.com. That's also the name of the podcast, but that's my website. The book's there, the social links are there as well as, there's the main show Behind the Human, but I've been doing more, I guess you can call them original series shows, content series between 8 and 11 episodes and so forth. And just trying to find, link up with brands that really want to help other people and produce original content, because I think we're in a phase where we're going to see a lot more AI generated content, which is fine and it's great, and a lot more templated content. But we are human, and I think we will seek original content as well. So I'm putting some effort into doing a few series like that with great brands this year.
Makes a ton of sense. Yeah, from a content perspective, people are going to care more to use your branding, what's behind the human versus what's behind the computer that is writing. So seeing content that I think it's going to be a lot of video, it's going to be a lot of audio where it's actual people talking as ambassadors of the brand to say that this is real, this is human, this is how I'm thinking, this is my point of view versus a computer. So I love that too. Well, thank you so much for being on. This is a great episode, tons of learnings and tidbits for our audience. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Great questions, and it's always a pleasure to hang with you.
Marc and Rachel Media.